The morning sun cast long shadows across the Fort Carson shooting range as Staff Sergeant Catherine Blackwood walked the firing line with her metal bucket. The sound of her boots on gravel was the only noise in the early Colorado air. She bent down, picking up brass shell casings one by one, dropping them into her bucket with soft clinks that echoed across the empty range. 3 months since the shrapnel tore through her right shoulder during her last deployment in Afghanistan. 3 months since the Army Medical Board decided she wasn't fit for active combat duty anymore, relegating a decorated marksman with 2 Purple Hearts to cleaning up after other soldiers' target practice. The pain flared as she reached for a casing half buried in the dirt. Her mind flashed back to that day on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. The mission was classified, the target high value, and the shot nearly impossible. She'd made it anyway. 2,847 meters. Then everything went sideways during extraction. Her unit had taken heavy fire. That's when the RPG hit, sending shrapnel tearing through the open door and into her shoulder. "Blackwood!" Sergeant First Class Marcus Hayes called out from across the range, his voice carrying that familiar note of impatience. He was a hard man, an Iraq War veteran who saw her as nothing but a burden, just another broken soldier the Army didn't know what to do with. "Make sure you get all those casings. We've got some VIPs coming in today for a demonstration." Kate nodded, keeping her voice neutral. "Yes, Sergeant." She straightened up, the bucket growing heavy in her left hand. As she worked, Kate noticed the targets set up at various distances: 500 meters, 800 meters, 1,200 meters, standard stuff. But what caught her eye was a single target, barely visible even to her trained eye, set up at what looked like an extreme distance. She squinted against the morning sun, estimating the range. "That's got to be over 3,000 meters, she whispered to herself. She'd only ever heard of shots like that being made in combat, and even then, rarely. Her own longest confirmed kill had been at 2,847 meters in the mountains of Afghanistan. That shot had made her a legend in certain circles, though few knew it was her behind the scope. The Taliban commander had been setting up an ambush for her convoy. One shot. If she'd missed, her unit would have been sitting ducks. The memory was interrupted by the sound of vehicles approaching. A convoy of Humvees pulled up to the range, dust clouds trailing behind them. Out stepped a group of officers, both American and foreign. Among them was a tall man with sharp blue eyes and a perfectly groomed mustache. Major Owen Graves, one of Britain's most famous military snipers and a member of the elite Special Air Service. "Gentlemen," announced Colonel Parker, the base commander, "welcome to Fort Carson. Today we'll demonstrate why American soldiers are among the finest marksmen in the world." Graves surveyed the range with the practiced eye of a professional, his gaze sharp and assessing. "Impressive setup you have here, Colonel," he said in his crisp British accent, "though I notice you have a target set quite far out." He pointed toward the distant silhouette. "That one must be what, 3,000 meters? Colonel Parker shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, it's 3,285 meters. We use it for special training exercises." Graves raised an eyebrow, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Extraordinary. I don't suppose any of your men have actually hit it." There was an uncomfortable pause. Parker cleared his throat. "Well, it's more of a theoretical exercise, Major." "Indeed." Graves' smile widened, cold and condescending. "In Her Majesty's service, we prefer practical demonstrations to theoretical exercises." Kate continued her work, but she was listening now. Something about the British major's tone set her teeth on edge. She'd encountered men like him before, officers who measured their worth by making others feel small. Standing beside Graves was another man who made Kate's instincts prickle, Colonel Viktor Petrov. Barrel-chested with weathered Slavic features and the hard eyes of someone who'd seen too much combat. Former Soviet Spetsnaz commander, now working as a NATO consultant. The presence of a Cold War enemy turned colleague was unusual enough to be noteworthy. The demonstration began with basic marksmanship at shorter ranges. The American soldiers performed well, their shots grouping tightly at 800 meters. At 1,200 meters, the success rate dropped, but they still managed respectable results. Graves watched with barely concealed boredom, his attention clearly focused on that distant target. When it came time for the long-range demonstration, Graves stepped up to the firing line. He was handed an M24 sniper rifle, which he examined with the casual familiarity of a master craftsman. He lined up on the 1,200-meter target first. The shot echoed across the range. "Center mass," called out the spotter. Without hesitation, Graves adjusted and aimed at the 1,800-meter target. Another shot, another hit. But Graves wasn't finished. He stood up and looked out at the distant target, the one at 3,285 meters. "That target," he said casually, his voice carrying across the range. "Has anyone ever attempted a shot at that distance?" Colonel Parker stammered slightly. "It's extremely difficult, Major. The wind conditions alone make it nearly impossible." "Interesting." Graves handed the rifle back to the range officer. "Perhaps it's best left as a theoretical exercise, after all." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like a challenge. "Of course, in Afghanistan, I made a confirmed kill at 2,970 meters. But I suppose conditions here in Colorado are more challenging." The implication was clear. Americans could talk about extreme, long-range shooting, but when it came to actually performing under pressure, they fell short. The assembled officers shifted uncomfortably, and Kate could feel the tension building like a thunderstorm on the horizon. That was enough. Kate set down her bucket. The metallic clunk drew a few curious glances, but she ignored them. She walked toward the firing line, her steps deliberate and measured. Behind her, she could feel eyes turning, confusion spreading through the assembled crowd. "Excuse me, sir," she said, addressing Colonel Parker. Her voice was steady, respectful, but there was steel underneath it. "Blackwood, what are you doing?" Marcus Hayes hissed from the sidelines. "Get back to work." But Colonel Parker held up his hand. He knew Kate's file, even if he'd momentarily forgotten it in the presence of foreign dignitaries. "What is it, Staff Sergeant?" Kate kept her eyes on Graves. "I'd like to attempt the shot, sir, the 3,285-meter target." The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if someone had pressed pause on the entire world. Officers stared. Soldiers whispered to each other. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Major Graves turned to look at her for the first time. His gaze traveled from her dirty fatigues to the brass bucket she'd been carrying, to the slight favor she gave her injured shoulder. When his eyes finally met hers, they were filled with barely concealed amusement. "I'm sorry," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Did the cleaning lady just volunteer for precision shooting?" Several of the British soldiers chuckled. Kate felt heat rise in her cheeks, but her voice remained steady. "Staff Sergeant Catherine Blackwood, sir. 2 tours in Afghanistan, sniper qualified, personal best confirmed kill at 2,847 meters." The chuckling stopped. Graves' expression shifted slightly. Surprise, then calculation, then back to condescension, all in the space of a heartbeat. "Interesting," he said slowly. "And you think you can hit a target at 3,285 meters with equipment you haven't zeroed, in conditions you haven't studied, after spending the morning collecting brass like a common laborer?" "I'd like to try, sir." Graves exchanged a glance with Colonel Petrov, who nodded slightly. Some unspoken communication passed between them, something that made Kate's instincts scream a warning. But she held her ground. "Very well," Graves said, his smile turning cold. "Let's make this interesting, shall we? If you miss, you continue your custodial duties without complaint." He paused for dramatic effect. "But if by some miracle you hit the target, I'll personally recommend you for the Queen's Medal for marksmanship." Colonel Parker, surprising everyone, leaned forward. "And if she hits center mass?" Graves' smile widened into something predatory. Then I suppose I owe her an apology, though I assure you, gentlemen, that won't be necessary. Kate nodded once. I accept those terms, sir. As the assembled officers stepped back to give her room, an elderly man approached from the side of the range. Master Sergeant James Reeves. At 68, with thinning silver hair and weathered features, Reeves was a relic from another era. A veteran of SEAL Team 6 during the Cold War and countless classified operations that never made it into history books. They called him Ghost, a nickname he'd earned in the mountains of Afghanistan back in 1985. Kate, he said quietly, using her first name despite protocol. She was surprised he knew who she was. In 3 months at Fort Carson, he'd never spoken directly to her. You sure about this? His voice was low, meant only for her ears. Yes, Master Sergeant. Ghost studied her face, and Kate had the strange sensation that he was seeing through her, past her, into some memory she didn't share. You remind me of your father, he said finally, same determination in the eyes. Kate froze. You knew my father? Tom Blackwood and I served together, SEAL Team 6. He was the best shooter I ever saw. Ghost paused, his gaze intense. Until now, perhaps. Before Kate could process this revelation, Ghost leaned closer. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. This is the opportunity you've been waiting for. Show them what a Blackwood can do. He stepped back, leaving Kate with 1,000 questions swirling in her mind. How did Ghost know her father? Why had he never approached her before? But there was no time to think about that now. Kate walked to the firing line and picked up the M24 rifle that Graves had been using. The scope was good, but not great. Standard issue, not customized for extreme long-range work. The rifle itself was well-maintained, but showed signs of regular use. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. The distance was enormous, nearly half a mile beyond her longest confirmed kill. The wind was variable, gusting from different directions at different elevations. The target was small, probably no more than 18 inches across, and she was using an unfamiliar rifle with a scope she'd never zeroed. The odds were heavily against her, which was exactly how she liked it. Kate knelt behind the firing line, the M24 rifle resting on its bipod. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the range fade away. The whispered conversations, the rustle of uniforms, the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. All of it dimmed until there was only the sound of her own breathing. When she opened her eyes, the world had narrowed to just her, the rifle, and that distant speck on the mountainside. She began her preparations methodically. First, she studied the wind. She could see grass and small bushes at various distances, watching how they moved. The wind near the firing line was coming from the southwest, at maybe 8 miles an hour. But at longer distances, she could see it was shifting, coming more from the west and picking up speed. The flags placed at intervals confirmed her assessment. Poor girl doesn't know what she's gotten herself into, she heard one of the British soldiers whisper. Major Graves stood with his arms crossed, watching her with the detached interest of a scientist observing a lab rat. Whenever you're ready, Staff Sergeant, he called out. We don't have all day. Kate ignored him. She was calculating bullet drop, wind drift, and a dozen other factors. The 7.62 millimeter NATO round would drop nearly 400 feet over that distance. The wind would push the bullet several feet to the right. The high humidity from yesterday's rain would slow the bullet slightly, increasing both drop and drift. Behind her, she could hear Graves speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. You know, in my experience, the most dangerous thing on a battlefield isn't the enemy. It's an overconfident soldier who doesn't know their limitations. The comment was designed to rattle her, to break her concentration. Kate had encountered this kind of psychological warfare before, from enemies and from fellow soldiers who couldn't accept that a woman might be their equal. She'd learned long ago not to let it affect her. Instead, memories flooded back. Afghanistan, 2019. Providing overwatch for a convoy when Taliban fighters had set up an ambush. Her spotter had called out a target at extreme range. The Taliban commander was directing his men into position, preparing to unleash hell on her unsuspecting unit. 2,847 meters, her spotter had said, his voice tight with tension. Wind shifting. You've got one shot. If she missed, her unit would be sitting ducks. There would be casualties, maybe deaths, friends, brothers in arms. Sending it, she'd replied. The shot had been perfect, striking the enemy commander at a distance most people couldn't even see with the naked eye. The ambush fell apart without leadership, and her convoy had made it through safely. That shot had earned her a Bronze Star with Valor device, though the citation was carefully worded to avoid mentioning the specifics of what she'd done. Another memory surfaced, older and softer around the edges. She was 12 years old, standing in the mountains of West Virginia with her father. Tom Blackwood had been a patient teacher, showing her how to account for wind, how to read the terrain, how to become one with the rifle instead of fighting against it. The rifle is just a tool, Katie, he'd said in that gentle way of his. The real weapon is the person behind it, their focus, their discipline, their heart. Tom Blackwood had been a SEAL sniper during the Cold War, though he rarely spoke about those days. He'd passed on his knowledge through countless weekends of practice, teaching his daughter the craft that had kept him alive through operations in places that didn't exist on any map. By the time Kate was 16, she could outshoot most grown men. When she joined the Army at 18, her father had given her a small, leather-bound notebook. My sniper's journal, he'd said. Things they don't teach in the manuals. Read between the lines. She'd studied that journal for years, committing every page to memory. The technical details, yes, but also the philosophy behind them. The mindset of a true marksman. The weight of responsibility that came with the power to take a life from distances where the target never even knew they were being hunted. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, Colonel Parker said, his voice carrying a note of concern. Are you ready? Kate settled into position behind the rifle, feeling the familiar comfort of the stock against her shoulder. Through the scope, the target was barely visible, a faint rectangular shape against the brown and green of the distant mountainside. She could see heat shimmer rising from the ground, adding another variable to her calculations. One shot? Graves asked, his tone mocking. Or would you prefer a few practice rounds? One shot, Kate replied without looking up. Confident, Graves said. I respect that, even if it's misplaced. Kate controlled her breathing, taking slow, deep breaths that came from her diaphragm. Her heart rate slowed. The chatter of the observers faded further into the background. Everything except her, the rifle, and the target ceased to exist. She found her natural point of aim, then made adjustments to account for the wind and distance. Her crosshairs were positioned well above and to the left of the target, so far off that an inexperienced shooter might think she was aiming at the wrong hillside entirely. But Kate knew what she was doing. At this distance, she wasn't aiming at where the target was. She was aiming at where the bullet would be after traveling for nearly 5 seconds through variable wind conditions and dropping 400 feet. She began to apply pressure to the trigger, gradually increasing the force. At this distance, even the slightest jerk would send the bullet far from its target. The trigger had to break cleanly, smoothly, almost as a surprise. Wind's picking up, observed one of the spotters, his voice carrying across the range. Kate had noticed it too. She made a tiny adjustment to her point of aim, her hands moving with the unconscious precision of thousands of hours of practice. Any time now, Staff Sergeant, Graves said, though his voice seemed to come from very far away. Though I suppose there's no shame in admitting this is beyond your capabilities. Kate tuned him out completely. She began her final breathing cycle, a technique her father had taught her when she was 15. He called it the Blackwood breath, a family technique passed down from her grandfather, who'd been a sniper in World War II. Deep breath in, let half of it out, hold. In that moment of perfect stillness, with her lungs half empty and her heart between beats, She applied the final pressure to the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The sound echoed off the mountains like thunder, rolling across the range and out into the vast Colorado wilderness. Through the scope, Kate stayed focused on the target area, though at this distance it would take nearly 4 seconds for the bullet to arrive. 4 seconds felt like an eternity. Behind her, she could hear the spotters adjusting their telescopes, trying to pick up any sign of impact. The assembled officers were silent, holding their breath. "I don't see an impact," called out one of the spotters, his voice uncertain. "Check the target," Colonel Parker ordered. There was a long pause as the spotter examined the distant target carefully through his high-powered telescope. Kate remained motionless behind the rifle, not allowing herself to hope or fear. Whatever happened, happened. The shot was beyond her control now. I think I see something," the spotter said finally. "It's hard to tell at this distance." "What do you mean you think you see something?" Graves demanded, his casual demeanor cracking slightly. "Either there's a hit or there isn't." "There appears to be a mark on the target, sir, but I can't tell if it's a bullet hole or just a shadow from this angle." Kate finally lifted her head from the scope. She'd felt the shot was good. Everything had come together in that perfect moment of release. But at this distance, even a perfect shot could be thrown off by factors beyond her control. A sudden gust of wind in the bullet's flight path, a miscalculation in the density altitude, any of 100 variables. "We'll need to drive out and check the target," Colonel Parker said, his voice betraying his own uncertainty. The drive to the target took 20 minutes across rough terrain. Kate sat in the back of a Humvee, her hands folded in her lap, her face impassive. Marcus Hayes drove, and she could see him glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Something had changed in his expression. He no longer looked at her with barely concealed contempt. Now there was something else in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or the beginning of respect. If she'd missed, she'd be the laughingstock of Fort Carson, the broken soldier who'd gotten above herself, who'd embarrassed not just herself but the entire United States military in front of foreign dignitaries. She'd spend the rest of her time at Fort Carson, however long that might be, as a cautionary tale about hubris and overconfidence. But if she'd hit, they approached the target slowly, bouncing over the uneven ground. Major Graves was in the lead vehicle, clearly expecting to prove his point about American overconfidence. Kate could see him through the windshield, his posture confident, almost eager. As they got closer, Kate could see it was a standard military silhouette target, about 18 inches wide and 30 inches tall. From this distance, with the naked eye, she could see something. A mark, fresh. Her heart began to race, but she forced herself to remain calm. Professional. She'd been trained not to show emotion, not to give anything away. They were close enough now to see the target clearly. There, just left of center mass, was a clean bullet hole. Fresh, recent, unmistakable. "Well, I'll be damned," whispered one of the American officers. Major Graves examined the hole closely, his face a carefully controlled mask. The silence stretched out, heavy and thick. Finally, he spoke. "Impressive," he said, though his tone suggested he was anything but impressed. "A hit at that range is certainly noteworthy." He paused. "Of course, it's not center mass, but under the circumstances," the spotter interrupted him. "Actually, sir, given the wind conditions and the distance, that shot is almost exactly where it should be for a perfect center mass aim point. The bullet drift puts it just slightly left, exactly what you'd expect with the crosswind we had." Kate allowed herself a small smile. The spotter was right. She hadn't been aiming for the left side of the target. She'd aimed for dead center and let physics do the rest. The wind had pushed the bullet left, exactly as she'd calculated. It was as close to a perfect shot as anyone could reasonably expect at that distance. Graves' expression darkened. "Indeed," he said stiffly. "Well, as I said, a noteworthy shot. Of course, anyone can get lucky." "Lucky?" Kate spoke for the first time since taking the shot. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Sir, with respect, Luck doesn't account for wind calculation, bullet drop compensation, and atmospheric conditions. That was a calculated shot based on training and experience. Graves turned to face her fully, his blue eyes cold and assessing. You don't look old enough to have much of either. I started competitive shooting when I was 12, sir. 8 years in the Army, 2 combat tours, 47 confirmed kills, including 6 at ranges over 1,500 meters. The numbers hung in the air like a challenge. Kate wasn't boasting. She was simply stating facts. But facts could be more damning than any insult. Colonel Parker, clearly uncomfortable with the tension building between them, cleared his throat. I think we can all agree that was an exceptional demonstration of marksmanship, Major. But Graves wasn't finished. He stepped closer to Kate, his height giving him a physical advantage he clearly intended to use. Staff Sergeant Blackwood, what exactly are you doing collecting shell casings if you're such an accomplished sniper? The question hit like a slap. Kate felt all eyes on her. American, British, Russian, everyone waiting to see how she would respond. The truth would make her look weak, but lying wasn't an option. I was wounded in action, sir, she said, her voice steady despite the shame that threatened to overwhelm her. Took shrapnel in my right shoulder during extraction. The Army Medical Board determined I was no longer fit for combat duties. So they relegated you to custodial work? Graves' smile was cold, calculated. Someone has to do it, sir. Indeed. His tone dripped with false sympathy. Though I have to wonder if the American military is making the best use of its resources. In the British Army, we find ways to utilize experienced soldiers, even when they can't serve on the front lines. The implication was clear. The Americans were wasteful, inefficient, foolish. They'd taken one of their best assets and reduced her to manual labor because of bureaucratic inflexibility. And worst of all, he was right. The drive back to the main base was silent, but the atmosphere had shifted. Marcus kept glancing at Kate in the rearview mirror, his expression no longer dismissive. Something had changed. By the time they reached Fort Carson, he'd made a decision. Kate stared out the window at the Colorado mountains, their peaks still capped with snow despite the summer heat. She'd made the shot. She'd proved her point. She'd earned a grudging acknowledgement from one of the world's most famous snipers. But nothing had really changed. Tomorrow she'd be back on the range with her bucket, collecting other people's shell casings, her talent wasted, and her career effectively over at 28 years old. Unless something else changed first. As Graves walked away from the target, he allowed himself a thin smile. The girl had skills, extraordinary skills, and more importantly, she was desperate, sidelined, hungry to prove herself. Exactly the kind of operative Coldfire needed. The kind who could be molded, controlled, used. And if she had her father's files hidden somewhere in that journal she carried, all the better. That evening, the story of Kate's shot spread through Fort Carson like wildfire. By the time the sun set, half the base had heard some version of the tale, most wildly exaggerated, though the basic facts were impressive enough. A wounded soldier assigned to range cleanup had outshot a famous British sniper at an impossible distance. Soldiers who'd barely acknowledged her existence now wanted to shake her hand, buy her drinks, hear the story firsthand. Marcus Hayes found her in the dining facility. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, carrying his tray. Kate gestured to the empty chair across from her. Marcus had been her supervisor for 3 months, but this was the first time he'd ever asked to sit with her. "Hell of a shot today," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "I mean, hell of a shot. I've been in the Army 15 years, and I've never seen anything like it." "Thank you, Sergeant." Marcus studied his food for a moment, then looked up. "You know, I owe you an apology. When they assigned you to my detail, I figured you were just another broken soldier they didn't know what to do with." He paused. "I was wrong." "I appreciate that, Sergeant. Question is, what happens now? You can't go back to just picking up brass after what you did today." Before Kate could respond, the dining hall fell unusually quiet. She looked up to see Major Graves entering with several other British officers. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea, soldiers instinctively making way for rank and reputation. Marcus muttered under his breath, "Speak of the devil. That British major's been asking questions about you all afternoon. Wanted to know your complete service record, your medical status, everything." As if summoned by their conversation, Graves walked directly to Kate's table. Up close, away from the assembled dignitaries, his demeanor had changed. The casual condescension was still there, but underneath it was something else. Calculation. Assessment. The look of a man who just discovered a potentially useful tool. "Staff Sergeant Blackwood," he said smoothly, "might I have a word?" Kate followed him to a quieter corner of the dining hall, aware of dozens of eyes tracking their movement. Graves waited until they were relatively alone before speaking. "That was quite a performance today," he began. "I've been thinking about it all afternoon. It wasn't a performance, sir. It was just shooting." "Just shooting?" A slight smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Tell me, Staff Sergeant, do you know what the longest confirmed kill in military history is?" "I believe it's held by a Canadian JTF-2 sniper, sir. 3,540 meters in Iraq." "Correct. And your shot today? 3,285 meters. That's extraordinary by any standard." He paused, letting the compliment settle. "I've been speaking with your Colonel Parker about your situation. It seems the American military has a talent for mismanaging its human resources." Kate said nothing, waiting to see where this was going. "I have a proposition for you," Graves continued, leaning in slightly. "The British Army is hosting an international sniper competition next month at our training facility in Scotland. Teams from 12 countries, the best military marksmen in the world." Kate's pulse quickened despite her attempt to remain calm. She'd heard of such competitions but had never imagined she might participate in one. "I have some influence over the selection process," Graves went on, "and after today's demonstration, I believe you might be exactly what the competition needs. I'm suggesting that you represent the United States. Show the world what American marksmanship is really capable of." For a moment, Kate was speechless. This was an opportunity she'd never dreamed of, a chance to compete at the highest level, to prove she was more than a broken soldier relegated to menial tasks. But something in Graves' manner made her cautious. Why would he offer this after she'd essentially humiliated him in front of his peers? "Sir, I'm not sure that's possible," she said carefully. "My medical status, my current assignment—" "Details," Graves said dismissively. "I've already spoken with Colonel Parker. He's willing to recommend you for temporary duty if I make the formal request." "Why would you do this, sir? After what happened today?" Graves' smile was enigmatic, giving nothing away. "Let's just say I believe in giving people the opportunity to prove themselves. Besides, it would be interesting to see how you perform under real pressure, with the best shooters in the world watching." The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was a test, maybe even a trap. "I need time to think about it, sir." "Of course, but not too much time. I'll need an answer by tomorrow evening." As Graves walked away, Marcus appeared at Kate's elbow. "What was that about?" Kate explained the offer, watching Marcus's expression shift from excitement to concern. "Blackwood, that sounds incredible. But are you sure about this guy's motives? After the way he acted today, after what you did to his reputation—" "I'm not sure about anything, Sergeant. But when was the last time someone offered me a chance to do what I was trained for?" That night, Kate lay awake in her barracks room, staring at the ceiling. The smart thing would be to decline Graves' offer. She had a comfortable, if unrewarding, assignment here at Fort Carson. Her shoulder was healing well. In a few months, she might be able to request reassignment to a training role, something that would let her use her skills without the physical demands of combat. But the shot today had reminded her of who she really was. Not a custodian, not a broken soldier. She was one of the finest marksmen the Army had ever produced. And now someone was offering her a chance to prove it on the world stage. She thought about her father, who had recognized her natural talent when she was just a girl. Tom Blackwood used to say that shooting wasn't about the gun or the target. It was about knowing yourself, trusting your training, and never backing down from a challenge. By morning, her decision was made. She found Master Sergeant Reeves at the sniper training facility, working with a group of young marksmen. When he saw her approach, he dismissed his students with a gesture. "Staff Sergeant Blackwood," he said formally, "what can I do for you?" "I'd like to speak with you in private, Master Sergeant." He nodded, leading her to a small office. Once the door closed, his demeanor changed. The formal distance dropped away, replaced by something warmer but still guarded. "You've been looking at your father's journal," he said. It wasn't a question. Kate was taken aback. "How did you know?" "You have the same look Tom did when he was working through a problem. I've been expecting you, actually. Figured you'd have questions after yesterday." "More than a few. You knew my father, served with him, and you've been here at Fort Carson all this time. Why didn't you ever approach me before?" Ghost sank into a chair with a sigh. "That's not a simple question, and it doesn't have a simple answer. Tom and I had complicated history. We were close during the Cold War, shared a sniper hide for 30 days in the mountains outside Kabul back in '85. That kind of experience forges bonds that don't break easily." "So what happened?" "Difference of opinion, professional at first, then personal. We went our separate ways after '91, but I kept tabs on him. Knew when he had a daughter, knew when you joined the Army. When I heard you'd been assigned here after your injury, I requested a transfer from Fort Bragg." Kate felt her throat tighten. "You transferred here because of me?" Ghost nodded slowly. "I owed Tom that much, to look out for his daughter, even if from a distance. I've been watching your progress, reading the reports. You're better than he was, you know, and he was the best I'd ever seen." The lump in Kate's throat made it hard to speak. The idea that her father would be proud, that someone who'd known him believed she'd surpassed him, meant more than she could express. "Graves offered me a place in the international competition next month," she said finally, "in Scotland." Ghost's expression darkened immediately. "I heard. Be very careful with that one, Kate. Owen Graves has a reputation for using people to serve his own ends. He doesn't make offers out of generosity. What do you think his real motive is?" "I'm not sure yet, but I have contacts who might know more." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "In the meantime, what are you going to tell him?" Kate took a deep breath. "I'm going to accept. This might be my only chance to prove I still have value as a soldier." Ghost studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I figured you'd say that. You're your father's daughter, all right. Too stubborn for your own good." His expression softened slightly. "If you're determined to do this, then I want to help. Let me be your coach. We've got a month to get you ready for whatever Graves has planned." "I'd be honored, Master Sergeant." "James," he said with a slight smile. "Or Ghost, if you prefer. That's what your dad called me." "James, then. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. The training I'm going to put you through will make your Ranger School experience look like a vacation." As Kate left Ghost's office, she felt a strange mix of emotions. Apprehension about what lay ahead, excitement at the prospect of returning to what she loved most, and curiosity about the connection between her father and this man who had suddenly appeared in her life. She found Graves in the officer's mess later that day. "Major Graves, sir. I've made my decision regarding your offer." Graves looked up from his meal. "And?" "I accept, sir. I would be honored to represent the United States in the competition." "Excellent," Graves said, something flickering behind his eyes. "I'll begin making the arrangements immediately." "Thank you, sir." As she turned to leave, Graves called after her. "Staff Sergeant Blackwood." She paused. "Sir?" "You should know, this competition isn't like what you did yesterday. 5 days of various challenges, different weather conditions, multiple distances and scenarios. The best snipers from around the world, all of them hungry to prove themselves. I understand, sir. Do you? His eyes were cold now, all pretense of friendliness gone. Because I'd hate for you to embarrass yourself, or more importantly, embarrass the United States military. There it was again, the subtle condescension, the implication that she was out of her depth. Kate straightened her shoulders, ignoring the twinge of pain from her injury. I won't embarrass anyone, sir. We'll see. Graves turned back to his meal. One more thing, this competition isn't just about marksmanship. It's about performing under pressure, adapting to unfamiliar equipment and conditions, mental fortitude under stress. Are you prepared for that? Kate thought about Afghanistan, about the weight of knowing that lives depended on her shots, about lying in a sniper hide for hours, controlling her breathing, her heartbeat, waiting for the perfect moment, about the shrapnel tearing through her shoulder and still completing the mission. I've been preparing for it my whole life, sir. Graves studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Pack your gear, Staff Sergeant. We leave for Scotland in 4 weeks. As Kate walked back to her barracks, the Colorado sun setting behind the mountains, she felt the weight of what she'd just agreed to settle on her shoulders. In 4 weeks, she'd be competing against the best military snipers in the world, testing herself against professionals who'd spent their entire careers perfecting their craft. But more than that, she'd be stepping into something she didn't fully understand yet. Ghost's warnings about Graves echoed in her mind. The British major had an agenda beyond simple sportsmanship. She was certain of that. Whatever lay ahead in Scotland, Kate knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't back down. She wouldn't let her father's memory be tarnished by failure. And she wouldn't let anyone, not Graves, not the medical board, not the doubters who saw her as a broken soldier, define what she was capable of. The Blackwood family didn't miss when it mattered, and this mattered. The next 4 weeks transformed Kate's life completely. Every morning at 0500 hours, she reported to the advanced training range where Ghost waited, his silver hair catching the first light of dawn as he set up complex shooting scenarios that would have challenged even the most experienced marksman. Sniper work is 90% preparation, Ghost told her on that first morning, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience. Any fool can pull a trigger. What separates the great ones from the dead ones is what happens before the shot. Ghost's training regimen was comprehensive and exhausting. Mornings were devoted to physical conditioning, exercises specifically designed to strengthen Kate's injured shoulder without risking further damage. He pushed her hard, but never past the point where pain became genuine danger. He'd seen too many soldiers ruin themselves trying to prove they were healed when they weren't. Afternoons focused on technical skills, wind reading in complex environments where gusts came from multiple directions, range estimation without equipment, relying solely on the trained eye, ballistic calculations done in her head while under time pressure, drills on unfamiliar weapon systems she might encounter in Scotland, British rifles, German precision instruments, even old Soviet-era equipment that some countries still used. Evenings were spent analyzing intelligence Ghost had somehow gathered on the other competitors. Swedish Captain Emma Larsson, known for her patience and ice-cold nerves. German Captain Klaus Weber, methodical and precise. Russian Colonel Viktor Petrov, the same man who'd been at Fort Carson, whose presence still made Ghost's jaw tighten with some old, unspoken tension. Petrov and I have history, Ghost said one evening, studying a grainy photograph. Afghanistan, 1985. His Spetsnaz hunter-killer teams were tracking us through the mountains. Good soldiers, dangerous men. If he's at this competition, it means something bigger is at play. The training was punishing. Some days Kate could barely lift her arms by the time she drove back to her barracks. Her shoulders screamed in protest, the muscles remembering the trauma of shrapnel even as they grew stronger. But gradually, incrementally, her skills sharpened. Her confidence grew, and the injured shoulder began to respond to the conditioning, the range of motion increasing day by day. "You're babying that shoulder," Ghost barked one afternoon when she winced during a drill. In Scotland, there won't be time for pain. There will only be the target and the shot. Everything else is just noise. The most challenging sessions involved Marcus Hayes, who had been officially assigned as Kate's training partner after Colonel Parker's order. Marcus had initially been reluctant. He had his own duties, his own training schedules to maintain. But after the 10th day, something changed. Ghost had set up a complex scenario involving multiple targets at varying distances, with shifting wind conditions. Marcus acted as spotter, calling out corrections while Kate worked through the targets with methodical precision. "Wind's shifting," Marcus muttered, his eye pressed to the spotting scope. 2 o'clock, about 7 miles per hour. Kate made a quick adjustment to her point of aim. "Elevation? Target 1 is approximately 22 minutes up from your 0. She took the shot. The sound echoed across the empty range. Through her scope, she watched the bullet impact exactly where she'd intended. Hit, then another, and another. 5 targets, 5 hits, all in conditions that would have made most marksmen hesitate. After they'd finished, Marcus sat back on his heels and looked at her with something new in his eyes. Not just respect, though that was there now, but genuine curiosity. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked quietly. "My father taught me the basics when I was 12, Kate said, beginning the process of cleaning her rifle. "The Army taught me the science. Afghanistan taught me the rest." Marcus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rougher, weighted with something Kate recognized as grief. "My brother was in Afghanistan, Helmand Province. Staff Sergeant Daniel Hayes. He didn't make it back." The confession caught Kate off guard. In the months of working together, Marcus had never mentioned a brother, never spoken about anything personal at all. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. "Yeah," Marcus's expression hardened, but not with anger, with memory. "That's why I pushed back against this assignment at first. You reminded me too much of him. He was training to be a sniper when his convoy hit an IED, never got the chance to find out how good he could have been." Kate lifted her water bottle in a small, solemn salute. "To Staff Sergeant Daniel Hayes." Marcus touched his bottle to hers. "To all of them who didn't come home." From that day forward, their dynamics shifted completely. Marcus became deeply invested in Kate's success, staying late after scheduled sessions, helping her fine-tune techniques, offering insights from his own combat experience. He became more than a training partner. He became an ally, a friend, someone who believed in what she was doing. The shooting incident happened in week 2, on a Tuesday morning that had started like any other. Kate was practicing at the 1,000-meter range, working on her breathing technique in preparation for longer distances. The day was clear, the wind moderate, conditions about as good as they ever got at Fort Carson. She was settling into position for her next shot when the world exploded. The crack of a rifle shot that wasn't hers. The spray of rock fragments as a bullet struck inches from her position. The sharp sting as stone chips cut across her cheek. And then Marcus was tackling her, driving her behind the nearest barricade, his weight crushing the air from her lungs. "Sniper!" Marcus shouted, his training taking over. 3 o'clock position, elevated, approximately 600 meters. Ghost was already on the radio, his voice calm but urgent as he called in security. Within minutes, the range was swarming with military police, weapons drawn, spreading out in a tactical search pattern. They found nothing except a single spent 7.62 millimeter casing at an abandoned position on the hillside overlooking the range. Ghost examined the casing with the careful attention of someone who'd seen this kind of thing before. "Professional work," he said grimly. "Get in, take the shot, disappear without a trace." Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Kate wiped dirt and blood from her face, her hands surprisingly steady. That wasn't an accident. Marcus was checking her for injuries, his movements efficient and professional, despite the adrenaline still pumping through both of them. If they'd wanted you dead, a shooter with that skill wouldn't have missed. Ghost nodded slowly, his expression darker than Kate had ever seen it. Marcus is right. This was a message. Someone doesn't want you going to Scotland. The emergency meeting in Colonel Parker's office was tense. Parker sat behind his desk, looking older than his 53 years, the weight of command evident in the lines around his eyes. The casing matches standard NATO ammunition, he said, spreading photographs of the evidence across his desk. Could have come from almost anywhere. No fingerprints, no distinctive markings. Forensics has nothing to work with. Ghost leaned forward, his voice carrying an edge Kate hadn't heard before. With respect, sir, this was a professional hit, or at least a professional warning. The placement, the timing, the clean escape, this wasn't some random incident. Are you suggesting someone on my base tried to assassinate Staff Sergeant Blackwood? Parker's tone made it clear he found the idea almost insulting. I'm suggesting we consider all possibilities, sir, including that there might be someone here who doesn't want her to succeed, or someone who's concerned about what she might discover if she goes to Scotland. Parker rubbed his temples, the gesture of a man dealing with problems beyond his pay grade. I've spoken with Major Graves about this incident. He's expressed concern but doesn't believe it warrants canceling Blackwood's participation in the competition. He turned to Kate, his expression softening slightly. Blackwood, in light of this incident, I would understand completely if you wanted to withdraw from the competition. No one would blame you. This is serious business. Kate sat up straighter, ignoring the protest from her shoulder. Not a chance, sir. If someone's trying to scare me off, that just tells me I'm on the right track. Parker studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but I'm assigning additional security to your training sessions, and you'll be under protective escort until you leave for Scotland. He looked at Marcus. Sergeant Hayes, you're officially assigned as Blackwood's security detail. Stay close to her. As they left the colonel's office, Ghost pulled Kate aside, his hand firm on her arm. They walked in silence until they were well away from any possible listeners, out near the perimeter fence where the wind carried their words away. This changes everything, Ghost said quietly. Whoever took that shot was sending a message, and I don't think it was just about scaring you away from a shooting competition. You think it's connected to whatever my father was investigating? I think we've stumbled onto something bigger than any of us realized. Ghost glanced around, old habits from decades of covert operations making him cautious, even on a secure military base. Be careful who you trust, Kate. Even me. You don't trust yourself? Ghost's expression was grim, haunted by memories Kate couldn't see. In this business, everyone has secrets, even old ghosts like me. The next 2 weeks of training passed without further incidents, but the atmosphere had changed. They varied their locations randomly, used counter-surveillance techniques that seemed paranoid until you remembered someone had taken a shot at Kate in broad daylight. Ghost brought in additional spotters, people he trusted from his days in SEAL Team 6, retired operators who asked no questions and watched the perimeter while Kate trained. Despite the added pressure, or perhaps because of it, Kate's skills continued to improve. Under Ghost's guidance, she mastered techniques that weren't taught in any Army manual, methods that had been passed down through generations of snipers who operated in the shadows. And there was something else, something Ghost showed her from her father's journal that she'd never fully understood before. Your father developed a breathing technique, Ghost explained one evening, the journal open between them. He called it the Blackwood breath. It's subtle, easy to miss if you don't know what you're looking for. But it's there in his notes, hidden in what looks like wind calculations. Ghost demonstrated, his own breathing falling into a rhythm that seemed almost meditative. It's about more than just controlling your respiration. It's about slowing your heart rate, calming your nervous system, entering a state where the shot becomes inevitable rather than intentional. Your grandfather used something similar in World War II. Tom refined it. Now you need to make it yours. Kate practiced the technique for hours, feeling her way into the rhythm, understanding finally what her father had tried to teach her through those cryptic notes. It was like learning to speak a language she'd heard all her life without understanding the words. 3 days before their scheduled departure for Scotland, Ghost arranged for a final meeting. Not at the training range this time, but at an old observation post on a hilltop overlooking the base. The meeting was set for 2200 hours. "Come alone," the message had said. Kate made her way there through the darkness, moving with the tactical awareness that had kept her alive in Afghanistan. The moon was nearly full, casting the landscape in silver light that made shadows sharp and distances deceptive. Ghost was already there when she arrived, a solitary figure silhouetted against the night sky. As she approached, she noted that he stood with his hands visible, away from his sides, a gesture meant to signal he was unarmed, not a threat. "You came," Ghost said as she drew near. "I want answers." Ghost nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting this. Operation Coldfire was never officially decommissioned. It was rebranded, buried deep within an international intelligence cooperative that doesn't appear on any organizational chart. Kate felt her heart rate increase despite her training. "And you're still part of it?" "I was. Past tense. I retired from active participation 5 years ago, but I maintained certain connections, kept my ear to the ground. Old habits die hard." "And my father?" Ghost sighed, the sound carrying decades of regret. "Tom was one of the original recruits, one of the best. They gave him the code name Hawk because of his vision. He could see things others missed. He operated in various theaters throughout the 80s and early 90s. Central America, Eastern Europe, places where the Cold War never really ended. It just went underground." Kate tried to reconcile this with the gentle, patient father she remembered. The man who'd taught her to shoot, yes, but also to appreciate the morning mist on the mountains, to read poetry, to understand that strength came in many forms. "He was an assassin," she said, making it a statement rather than a question. "He was a soldier who carried out missions that required extraordinary skills and absolute discretion," Ghost said carefully. "Missions that saved lives, prevented wars, kept the balance of power from tipping into something catastrophic." He paused. "He left the program after a mission in Nicaragua went wrong. Civilian casualties, the kind of thing that changes a man, makes him question everything he thought he knew about right and wrong." "And Graves?" "Current operational director for the European division. They call him Raven. He's been running cold-fire operations for the past decade, ever since the program went fully black after 9/11. Kate processed this information, pieces falling into place like a sniper's reticle settling on target. "So this competition is a recruitment and evaluation tool." "Yes, but there's more." Ghost moved closer, his voice dropping even lower. "Recent intelligence suggests someone within Coldfire is running an unsanctioned operation, selling the skills of their best assets to private interests, corporations, criminal organizations, anyone with enough money and the right connections. Assassins for hire." Ghost nodded grimly. "Exactly. And Graves is our prime suspect. The timing fits, the methods fit, and his sudden interest in recruiting you, that fits too. There's a faction within the organization that wants to shut down these rogue operations. Clean house. Bring Coldfire back to what it was supposed to be, or shut it down entirely. I'm part of that faction. And you think Graves is bringing me to Scotland because..." Kate let the question hang. "Two possibilities. Either he wants to recruit you, given your skills and your father's history with the program, you'd be an attractive candidate, or he thinks you already know something your father might have told you or left for you before he died." Kate thought about her father's journal, the pages she'd studied for years, the cryptic notes about win calculations that never quite made sense, the sequences of numbers that seemed random. Could there be more to it than shooting advice? "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Go to Scotland, participate in the competition, keep your eyes open, and report back anything unusual. But most importantly, be careful. Graves is dangerous. He's survived in this business for 20 years, which means he's either very good or very ruthless. Probably both. You're asking me to be a spy. I'm asking you to help prevent a covert assassination program from being sold to the highest bidder. Ghost's expression softened slightly. I made a promise to your father before he died that I'd look out for you. This is me trying to keep that promise. Tom suspected something was wrong within Coldfire. He was gathering evidence, building a case, and then he died of a sudden heart attack at 46 years old. The implication hung in the air between them like cordite smoke. Kate felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. You think he was murdered? I think Tom Blackwood knew things that powerful people wanted kept secret. I think he was asking questions that made those people nervous. And I think his death was very convenient for certain parties within Coldfire. Ghost met her eyes. I can't prove it, but I've been in this business long enough to recognize a pattern when I see one. Kate stood silent for a long moment, processing everything Ghost had told her. Part of her wanted to walk away, to return to the simple life of collecting shell casings and healing her shoulder. But another part, the part that was truly Tom Blackwood's daughter, knew she couldn't turn her back on this. If I do this, she said finally, I need something from you. Name it. The full truth about my father. Everything you know, good and bad. No more cryptic warnings or partial explanations. When I get back from Scotland, you tell me everything. Ghost nodded slowly. When you return from Scotland, you have my word. Back in her quarters that night, Kate pulled out her father's journal and began examining it with fresh eyes. For years, she'd studied these pages for sniper techniques and ballistic calculations. Now she was looking for something else entirely. A code, a hidden message, anything that might contain the information Ghost believed her father had gathered. She started with the pages that had always puzzled her. Sequences of numbers labeled as wind correction factors, but with no corresponding explanations. The numbers themselves didn't follow any ballistic principles she recognized. They seemed almost random, which meant they probably weren't. Marcus knocked on her door around midnight, concern evident in his face when she answered. Saw your light still on. You okay? Kate gestured him inside, then showed him the journal. Look at these number sequences. Do they mean anything to you? Marcus studied them carefully, his brow furrowed. Could be a cipher. Military-grade encryption often uses seemingly random number sequences as keys. You'd need a key text to decode them, something both the sender and receiver would have access to. Kate's mind raced back through her memories, a book her father would have expected her to have, something every sniper would carry. And then it hit her. I need the Army Sniper Training Field Manual, FM 23-10. Every qualified sniper has a copy. Marcus went to his pack and pulled out a well-worn manual, the pages dog-eared from constant use. Standard issue. Never go anywhere without it. Kate took the book and began cross-referencing the numbers in her father's journal. If she was right, these weren't wind corrections at all. They were page numbers, paragraph numbers, word numbers, a book cipher hidden in plain sight. She worked methodically, her training in code breaking from intelligence school coming back to her. The first sequence, 14237, became page 142, paragraph 3, word 7. She flipped to the page and counted down. The word was evidence. The next sequence yielded against, then Coldfire, then operatives. Slowly, painstakingly, a message emerged from the seemingly random numbers. Kate's hands began to shake as she decoded it, Marcus looking over her shoulder, both of them realizing what they were reading. Evidence against Coldfire operatives in private assassinations hidden in secure server. Access code Hawk's Nest 1987. Contact James Reeves if I don't return. Trust no one in command. Love, Dad. Kate sat back, the implications sinking in like ice water through her veins. He knew, she whispered. He knew they'd kill him. Marcus's voice was grim. Heart attack my ass. They eliminated him once they realized he had evidence against them. But they never found the evidence. They think he gave it to me, but he didn't. He left me instructions on how to find it. Kate looked at Marcus. And there's more. A second page of codes. She worked through the next sequence, her fingers moving faster now that she understood the pattern. This message was shorter, but just as damning. William Reeves has copies. Scotland Conference. Protect him. Finish what I started. William Reeves? Marcus asked. Kate was about to answer when there was a quiet knock at the door. She opened it to find Ghost standing there, his expression telling her he'd been listening from outside. My brother, Ghost said, entering the room. William Reeves, former CIA station chief for Eastern Europe during the Cold War. He helped Tom gather evidence against Coldfire. Now he's a whistleblower, trying to expose the program from inside the system. Where is he now? Kate asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. Ghost's face was grim. That's the problem. He's scheduled to testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee next month about illegal covert operations. And I just received intelligence that he's the keynote speaker at an international security conference at a manor house in Scotland, same week as your competition. The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. Kate stood, needing to move as her mind raced through the implications. They're not recruiting me, she said. This whole competition is cover for an assassination. They're going to kill your brother, and they need world-class snipers in Scotland to provide distraction and cover. If he dies during an international military sniper event, it looks like an accident, or like a rival nation, not like a sanctioned hit. Marcus swore softly. And if you're there competing, making headlines with female sniper makes history stories, you provide the perfect distraction while the real shot happens 30 miles away. Ghost nodded slowly, his expression that of a man watching his worst fears confirmed. And if you refuse to go, you become a loose end, someone who knows too much and can't be controlled. Then we stop them, Kate said with a certainty she didn't entirely feel. We go to Scotland, we find the evidence, we expose Coldfire, and we save your brother. How? Marcus asked. We have no proof, no authority, no backup. We'd be walking into enemy territory with nothing but suspicions and a decoded message. We have more than that, Kate said, her mind already working through the tactical problem. We have Ghost's knowledge of how Coldfire operates. We have my shooting skills. We have Marcus as a spotter. And we have the element of surprise. They don't know we've decoded the journal. They think we're walking in blind. You're talking about going behind enemy lines with no support, Ghost said quietly. Kate smiled, though there was no humor in it. Wouldn't be the first time. The day of departure arrived with unseasonable cold, a front moving down from Canada that made the Colorado morning feel more like late autumn than summer. Kate stood on the tarmac at Peterson Air Force Base, her gear packed, her shoulder as ready as it would ever be, watching as Major Graves directed the loading of equipment onto the C-17 transport plane. Marcus stood beside her, his own bag packed. After the shooting incident, Colonel Parker had insisted he accompany Kate to Scotland as both her spotter and her security detail. Neither of them had objected. Remember what Ghost said, Marcus murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Trust no one completely, not even him. Especially not him, Kate replied, watching Graves move among the crates in equipment cases with the easy confidence of a man in his element. The interior of the C-17 had been modified for passenger transport, though calling it comfortable would be generous. As they boarded, Kate noted the other teams already settling in. 4 German soldiers sat together near the front, their demeanor professional and reserved. Across the aisle, a group of Scandinavians conversed quietly in what sounded like Swedish. As Kate and Marcus stowed their gear and found seats, a tall woman with blonde hair and sharp blue eyes approached. She moved with the controlled grace of someone trained in combat, her gaze assessing Kate with professional interest. You must be the Americans, she said, her English carrying only the slightest accent. I'm Captain Emma Larson, Swedish Army Ranger Battalion. Kate stood to shake her hand. Staff Sergeant Catherine Blackwood. This is Sergeant Marcus Hayes. Emma's smile was pleasant, but didn't quite reach her eyes. I've heard about you, Staff Sergeant. Your shot at Fort Carson has become something of a legend already. News travels fast in our circles. It does, Kate agreed neutrally. Emma glanced around, then lowered her voice slightly. I look forward to seeing what you can do in Scotland. It's not often we get to compete against someone of your caliber. There was something in her tone, something that suggested layers beneath the surface pleasantries. After Emma walked away, Marcus muttered, "Strange. The way she looked at you, like she was trying to communicate something without saying it." The flight to Heathrow was long and uncomfortable, the C-17 not designed for passenger comfort. They landed in the early morning, the London sky gray and drizzling. At Heathrow, they transferred to a smaller military transport for the final leg to Scotland. That's when the Russian team arrived. Colonel Viktor Petrov led them, and Kate felt ghost warnings crystallize into something concrete when she saw him. He was exactly as Ghost had described, barrel-chested, with the weathered features of someone who'd spent decades in harsh conditions, and eyes that assess threats with the automatic reflex of a predator. Former Soviet Spetsnaz commander, hunter-killer specialist from the Afghan wars, a man who'd spent the 1980s tracking American special forces through mountain passes where one mistake meant death. When Graves introduced them, Petrov's handshake was firm, but his expression gave nothing away. He looked at Kate with neither approval nor disapproval, just cold professional assessment. Then his gaze shifted to Marcus, and something flickered in those hard eyes. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. On the final flight to Scotland, the dynamics became clearer. Petrov deliberately shouldered past Marcus in the narrow aisle, a move that could have been accidental, but wasn't. "Americans," Petrov said, his accent thick but his English clear, "always bringing their damaged goods to compete." Marcus tensed, his body coiling for a response, but Kate placed a hand on his arm. "Not worth it," she said quietly. Petrov's eyes flickered to Kate's shoulder, visible even through her uniform jacket, the slight hitch in how she moved betraying the old injury. "In Russia, broken soldiers are not sent to embarrass their country." Kate met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away. "In America, we judge soldiers by their results, not their appearance." Petrov's expression darkened, but before he could respond, Graves intervened smoothly. "Gentlemen, ladies, save your competitive spirit for tomorrow. You'll have plenty of opportunity to prove yourselves on the range." The Scottish Highlands appeared through the windows as they descended, rolling hills covered in heather, ancient stone walls dividing fields that had been worked for centuries, and in the distance, mountains that reminded Kate of home. The Special Reconnaissance Regiment training facility sprawled across a valley, modern buildings mixing with older stone structures that spoke of military presence dating back generations. Graves gathered everyone on the tarmac after they disembarked, his voice carrying across the assembled competitors with practiced authority. "Welcome to Scotland. For the next 5 days, you will test your skills against the best marksmen in the world under some of the most challenging conditions imaginable." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the faces of the assembled snipers. Kate saw anticipation there, nervous energy, professional excitement, but also calculation. These were people who killed for their countries, who'd looked through scopes at living human beings and made the decision to end those lives. They were not people to be taken lightly. "But this is more than a competition," Graves continued. "It is an opportunity to forge connections, to learn from one another, and perhaps to explore new opportunities that might arise from your demonstrated abilities." The implication was clear to anyone listening carefully. This wasn't just about shooting. It was about recruitment, assessment, finding people with the skills and temperament for work that went beyond normal military operations. That evening, after they'd been assigned quarters and given time to settle in, Kate found a message slipped under her door. Just a time and place, written in neat block letters. 2100 hours. Equipment Shed 3. Come ready to talk. She showed it to Marcus, who examined it carefully. Could be a trap. Could be the contact Ghost said might reach out, Kate countered. Either way, we need to know. They approached the equipment shed cautiously, using the tactical movement they both learned in combat zones. The building was on the edge of the facility, far enough from the main barracks to offer privacy, but close enough to the perimeter fence that escape routes existed if needed. Inside, they found Emma Larson and another man Kate recognized from the German team, Captain Klaus Weber. Both had their hands visible, a gesture of non-aggression that mirrored what Ghost had done back at Fort Carson. "Thank you for coming," Emma said quietly. "I apologize for the cloak and dagger approach, but I needed to speak with you away from potential surveillance." "About what?" Marcus asked, his posture still defensive. Emma's expression was serious now, all pretense of casual friendliness gone. "About why we're really here. This competition is not what it appears to be." "We know about Coldfire," Kate said, deciding to take the calculated risk of revealing what they knew. Emma's eyes widened slightly, genuine surprise breaking through her professional calm. "Then you know the danger you're in." "Why don't you tell us what you know?" Kate suggested. Emma glanced at Klaus, who nodded. She turned back to Kate and Marcus. "I'm with Swedish military intelligence. For the past year, we've been investigating a series of high-profile assassinations across Europe. The targets varied: politicians, business leaders, military officials. But the methodology was consistent: long-range precision shots that could only have been made by someone with exceptional training and equipment." "And you think these assassinations are connected to Coldfire?" Kate said. "We believe someone is selling the services of Coldfire operatives to private clients," Emma confirmed. "Criminal organizations, corporations seeking to eliminate business rivals, even some governments who want plausible deniability for eliminating political opponents." "Graves," Marcus said flatly. "That's our theory, but we need proof. That's where you come in." "Why tell us?" Kate asked. Emma's slight smile held no humor. "Because I believe we're on the same side, Staff Sergeant, and because your father tried to stop them. Tom Blackwood was building a case against Coldfire before he died. We think Graves had him killed." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Kate felt her jaw tighten, old grief mixing with new rage. "What do you want from us?" "Cooperation," Emma said simply. "Share what you learn, and I'll do the same. Together we might stand a chance of exposing whatever Graves is planning before it's too late." Klaus spoke for the first time, his German accent more pronounced than Emma's Swedish one. "I have also learned something disturbing. 2 members of the Russian team are not who they claim to be. They are not active Russian military. They are private contractors with ties to a security firm that has been implicated in several of the assassinations we are investigating." "Petrov?" Kate asked. "Surprisingly, no. Petrov appears to be legitimate Russian military intelligence. It is the others who concern us, the ones Petrov treats as subordinates rather than equals." Kate processed this information, understanding dawning. So Graves is assembling a team, using this competition as cover for recruitment, but for what specific purpose? "That," Emma said, "is what we need to find out. Tomorrow's competition begins. The ultra-long-range event will draw significant media attention. Perfect cover for whatever else might be happening behind the scenes." They talked for another hour, sharing intelligence, forming a tentative alliance based on mutual suspicion of Graves and mutual interest in surviving whatever was coming. When they finally left the equipment shed, moving separately to avoid suspicion, Kate felt both better and worse about their situation. Better because they had allies. Worse because those allies confirmed that the threat was real, immediate, and deadly serious. Back in their quarters, Marcus checked the room for surveillance devices with equipment he'd quietly acquired before leaving Fort Carson. He found nothing obvious, but that didn't mean they were safe. "What's our play here?" he asked, once he was satisfied they could speak freely. Kate sat on her bunk, thinking through the tactical problem. We compete. We perform well enough to stay in the running, but not so well that we draw unnecessary attention. We watch Graves. We look for evidence of what he's planning, and we try to stay alive long enough to stop whatever's coming. That's not much of a plan. It's what we have. Kate pulled out her father's journal, running her fingers over the worn leather cover. Tomorrow, the shooting starts. That's when we'll see who's really here to compete and who's here for something else. And the assassination? The security conference? We deal with that when we know more. Right now, we focus on surviving the competition and gathering intelligence. Kate looked at Marcus. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But sleep was elusive. Kate lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling of the Scottish barracks, listening to the wind howl across the highlands. Somewhere in this facility was a man who'd probably ordered her father's death, who was planning another assassination, who saw her as either a potential recruit or a potential threat. The smart thing would be to go to Colonel Parker, to blow the whistle, to let official channels handle this. But official channels had failed her father. Official channels had reduced her to collecting shell casings despite her skills in service. Official channels move slowly, bound by procedure and politics. Sometimes, Kate thought, you had to take the shot even when regulations said to wait for clearance. Sometimes you had to trust your training, your instincts, and your commitment to doing what was right rather than what was approved. She thought about her father, about the risks he'd taken gathering evidence against Coldfire, about the ultimate price he'd paid for trying to do the right thing, about the legacy he'd left her, not just the shooting skills in the journal, but the example of a man who'd walked away from power and money because his conscience wouldn't let him be part of something corrupt. Tomorrow the competition would begin, and with it, whatever Graves had planned would move into its next phase. Kate Blackwood was walking into a trap, but she was walking in with her eyes open, with allies, and with skills honed by her father's teaching and refined by years of combat. Outside, the Scottish wind continued to howl, carrying with it the promise of challenges to come. The Scottish dawn broke cold and gray, mist clinging to the hillsides like smoke from ancient battles. Kate had been awake since 400 hours, running through her pre-competition routine, equipment checks, mental preparation, and the breathing exercises Ghost had drilled into her until they became as automatic as her heartbeat. The first 2 days of competition tested every aspect of snipercraft. Day 1 brought static shooting at known distances through the persistent Scottish mist. Kate performed solidly, finishing 5th overall. Day 2 focused on fieldcraft, shooting from awkward positions at unknown distances with time pressure. This was where her combat experience showed. By end of Day 2, she climbed to 3rd place. British Sergeant Dylan Brooks led, followed by Emma Larson in 2nd. But it was Day 3 that mattered. Day 3 was the Ultra Long Range Challenge, the event that had drawn international media attention and would serve as whatever cover Graves needed for his real plans. During lunch, Emma found Kate in the mess hall and sat down with practiced casualness. "Are you nervous about this afternoon?" Emma asked, her voice pitched to carry to nearby tables. "Focused," Kate replied, playing along while reading the message in Emma's eyes. "We've identified the target," Emma said quietly, leaning forward. "William Reeves is scheduled to give his keynote address at Ravenscroft Manor at noon tomorrow. Security is minimal. They're not expecting threats." Kate felt her heart rate increase, but kept her expression neutral. "And the shooter?" "Equipment was moved into position last night, approximately 1,500 meters from the manor. Specialized, long-range system with suppressor. Professional setup. We need to warn him." Klaus accessed an unsecured phone line, but all outgoing calls are being blocked. "We're isolated here by design." Emma's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Whatever happens tomorrow, it happens fast." The afternoon's ultra-long-range event drew the largest crowd yet. Camera crews positioned themselves strategically. Journalists clustered near the firing line. Major Graves stood among the press, his posture relaxed but his eyes constantly moving, assessing, calculating. The rules were brutal in their simplicity. Each shooter would get one practice shot to gauge conditions, followed by one shot for score. All competitors would use identical equipment, British L115A3 rifles with fixed power scopes. No ballistic computers, no rangefinders, no technological aids, just the shooter, the rifle, and a target 3,500 meters away that looked like a distant mirage. Kate studied that target with surgical intensity. The distance was enormous, over 2 miles through shifting wind. She ran calculations in her head, compensating for bullet drop approaching 500 feet, wind drift across varied terrain, the Coriolis effect at this extreme range. The shooting order was determined by random draw. Kate pulled number 8, giving her the advantage of observing 7 attempts before her own shot. Colonel Petrov shot first. Both his practice shot and his shot for score disappeared without visible impact. The second shooter, an Australian sergeant, also missed. So did the third and fourth. The Italian shooter in 5th position managed to kick up dirt 50 meters short of target. Then came Captain Klaus Weber. The methodical German took his time, reading wind with infinite patience. When he fired, Kate saw it through her binoculars before the spotters called it. Impact! Left edge of target! A murmur ran through the crowd. The first hit. Klaus had proven it could be done. Sergeant Dylan Brooks shot 7th. His preparation was textbook professional. When he fired, the spotters confirmed it. Impact, right side, low. 2 hits out of 7 attempts. The bar was set. Now it was Kate's turn. She stepped up to the firing line, aware of camera shutters clicking, of whispered conversations falling silent, of Graves somewhere behind her watching with those cold, calculating eyes. Through the scope, the target was almost invisible, a faint rectangular shape her brain had to work to distinguish from the hillside. Kate settled into position, feeling the familiar comfort of a rifle against her shoulder. She began her breathing routine, letting her heart rate slow, her focus narrow. Behind her, she heard Graves speaking to a journalist, his voice pitched to carry. Remarkable that she's even attempting this, given her limited experience in international competition. The pressure alone would break most shooters. The comment was designed to rattle her. Kate had encountered this before, psychological warfare disguised as casual observation. She pushed it aside, diving deeper into the mental state that made impossible shots possible. She thought of her father, of the technique he'd developed and passed down to her, the Blackwood breath. She let herself fall into that rhythm, feeling her consciousness shift into a state where time seemed to slow. Ghost's words echoed in her memory. Your father made this exact shot in Honduras, 1987. Saved my life and 5 others. Kate found her natural point of aim, then made the calculations that would transform aim into hit. Her crosshairs settled well above and to the left of the target, so far off that anyone watching would think she was aiming at the wrong hillside. But she was aiming at where the bullet would be after nearly 5 seconds of flight time, after dropping hundreds of feet, after being pushed sideways by variable wind. Any time now, Staff Sergeant, Graves said, his tone suggesting boredom. Though I suppose there's no shame in admitting this is beyond your capabilities. Kate tuned him out completely. She was in the zone now, that mental space where nothing existed except the shot. Deep breath in, let half out, hold. The Blackwood breath carrying her to that moment of perfect stillness between heartbeats. She squeezed the trigger with pressure so gradual it was almost imperceptible. The rifle bucked. The sound rolled across the Scottish Highlands like thunder. Through the scope, Kate stayed focused on the target area. 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours. The entire range fell silent. Impact, the spotter called out. Then a pause that stretched into eternity. Center mass, dead center. The range erupted into chaos. Competitors shouted. Camera crews rushed for angles. Officials spoke urgently into radios. And through it all, Kate slowly lifted her head from the scope, her face showing nothing of the triumph surging through her veins. Dylan Brooks stood nearby, staring through his binoculars. "Bloody hell," he whispered. "That's impossible." But Kate had done it. 3,500 meters, center mass, under pressure and scrutiny, using unfamiliar equipment, with the weight of her father's legacy pressing down on her. The remaining four competitors shot, but Kate's perfect hit had rattled them psychologically. The French shooter missed. The Canadian missed. The Norwegian hit wide. Emma Larson came close, but not quite matching Kate's precision. When official results were announced, Kate had won decisively. Her center mass, hit at 3,500 meters, was being called one of the greatest shots in competitive sniper history. After the press dispersed, Graves approached with an expression that mixed genuine respect with something harder to read. "Staff Sergeant Blackwood," he said formally, "I owe you an apology. When I invited you to this competition, I expected you to struggle. I thought your shot in Colorado was largely luck." Kate met his gaze steadily. "And now, sir?" "Now I realize I was wrong about your abilities, about luck versus skill, and about what makes a truly exceptional soldier." He paused. "There's more. I'd like you to join me this evening for a private briefing. 2,100 hours in the command center. Sergeant Hayes is welcome to accompany you." Before Kate could respond, Graves walked away, leaving her with confirmation of what she'd suspected. The recruitment pitch was coming, and with it, the trap would spring closed. That evening at 2,100 hours, Kate and Marcus entered the command center to find Graves waiting with two other men. Colonel Richard Harris of British military intelligence wore civilian clothes but carried unmistakable military bearing. Dr. Alan Parker, introduced as being from a defense technology laboratory, had soft hands and careful eyes. "Staff Sergeant Blackwood, Sergeant Hayes," Graves began smoothly. "We have a proposition for you." Harris leaned forward. "Your performance today was exceptional. The kind of skill we look for in very specialized operations that require the highest level of precision and discretion." "What kind of operations, sir?" Kate asked, though she already knew. Dr. Parker spoke up, his tone academic and detached. "Operations involving high-value targets that threaten global security but cannot be addressed through conventional channels. Terrorists who hide behind sovereign borders. Arms dealers whose removal would save thousands of lives." "Assassinations," Marcus said flatly, cutting through the euphemisms. Harris frowned slightly. "We prefer the term targeted interventions. But yes, in essence, we're offering you a position with a joint US-UK Special Operations Unit that operates outside traditional military structures." Kate kept her voice neutral. "And why approach me, sir? Surely there are plenty of qualified snipers." Graves smiled, and Kate saw the predator beneath the professional veneer. "Your injury is precisely what makes you perfect. You've been disregarded by your own military, pushed aside despite your extraordinary talents. We're offering you a chance to continue serving at the highest level." Kate let silence stretch, as if considering. Then she said quietly, "My father was involved in something similar, wasn't he? Operation Coldfire." The atmosphere changed instantly. Harris and Parker exchanged quick glances. Graves' expression hardened. "Your father was one of our best operatives," Graves confirmed carefully. "Codename Hawk. He served with distinction for over a decade, until he became disillusioned with certain operational decisions." Kate pressed forward, watching their reactions. "He discovered you were selling Coldfire services to private interests, using trained military assassins as hired killers." "That's a serious accusation, Staff Sergeant," Harris said coldly. "Is it accurate?" Kate asked. Graves studied her face, then seemed to make a decision. "Your father had concerns about how the program evolved, concerns that he chose to document extensively. We call them the librarian files. Tom Blackwood's obsessively detailed records of every Coldfire operation, every client, every transaction. And you think I have them?" Kate said. "We know your father entrusted something to you before his death." Graves leaned forward. "We need those files. They contain information that could endanger operatives still in the field, compromise operations, and damage national security." Kate felt the trap closing, but kept her voice steady. "I don't have any files. My father left me a journal with shooting techniques, nothing more." Graves' smile was cold. "Perhaps you don't realize what you have. The information could be encoded, hidden." Marcus spoke up, his tone aggressive. "Or perhaps you're looking for something that doesn't exist so you can cover up your own crimes." Dr. Parker tried a softer approach. "Staff Sergeant, we're offering you an opportunity. Join us, help us recover those files, and in return, you'll have access to resources and missions that will let you use your skills at the highest level." "And if I refuse?" Kate asked. The temperature seemed to drop. Harris's expression hardened. "That would be unfortunate, for everyone involved." The threat was clear. Kate nodded slowly as if considering. "I need time to think about this." "Of course," Graves said, turning conciliatory. "Take tonight. We'll meet again tomorrow." He paused. "But I should mention, our offer is time-sensitive. We have a demonstration scheduled for the day after tomorrow, a proof of concept for an important client. Your decision should be made by tomorrow evening." "What kind of demonstration?" Kate asked. "Nothing you need concern yourself with yet," Graves said smoothly. "Just know that opportunities like this don't come along often. Choose wisely." Back in their quarters, Kate and Marcus moved immediately into action. "They're going to kill us whether we agree or not," Marcus said quietly. "Once they think they've gotten what they want from you, we become loose ends." "I know," Kate replied, "but they won't move until they're sure I've given them everything. That gives us maybe 12 hours to get to Ravenscroft Manor, warn William Reeves, and stop the assassination." Marcus checked his watch. "It's 22:30 now. The keynote speech is at noon tomorrow. That's 13 and a half hours, and we're locked down with no transportation. Then we create a situation they can't ignore, something that forces them to break lockdown and gives us a chance to slip away." Kate outlined her plan. Marcus listened with growing concern. "That's insane," he said when she finished. "You have a better idea?" "No, which is what worries me." The next morning brought the competition's final event, a complex tactical course combining distance shooting with movement through varied terrain. 7 stages, multiple targets at different positions. Kate moved through the early stages efficiently, conserving energy. By mid-morning, she'd advanced to the 6th stage, from 400 to 1,200, from 400 to 1,200 meters. Kate settled into the natural depression, serving as firing position. Marcus beside her with the spotting scope. "Ready when you are, Staff Sergeant," the range officer announced. 3 minutes to engage all 7 targets." Kate settled behind her rifle and began engaging targets with practiced precision. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6. All hits, all clean. Then, instead of engaging the 7th target, Kate swung her rifle away from the designated course. Her crosshairs settled on the facility's fuel storage tanks, located approximately 800 meters away, well outside the target area. "Blackwood, what are you doing?" Marcus shouted, loud enough for observers to hear. "The last target is to your right." Kate didn't respond. She took a deep breath, held it, squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the fuel tank with precision, penetrating the metal shell. Fuel began leaking, spreading across the ground. The range officer was on his radio immediately. "Competitor has fired outside course boundaries. Security to final position. We have a fuel leak." Before anyone could react, Kate ejected the spent cartridge and loaded another round. Her second shot was even more calculated, aimed at the electrical transformer mounted on a pole near the growing fuel pool. The transformer exploded in a shower of sparks. The sparks met the pooling fuel, and the entire storage area erupted in a massive fireball that sent black smoke billowing into the Scottish sky. Alarms began blaring. Security personnel scrambled toward the fire. The competition area descended into controlled chaos. "Now!" Kate shouted, abandoning her rifle and grabbing her pre-packed go-bag. Marcus was right behind her as they sprinted down the backside of the hill toward the perimeter fence. They'd covered about 500 meters when the first shots rang out, security forces attempting to stop them. "Split up," Kate called. "Rally point Alpha." Marcus veered left while Kate continued straight toward the section of fence they'd identified. She could hear shouting behind her, boots pounding, but she didn't look back. She reached the fence and found the drainage culvert that passed beneath the barrier. Kate dropped to her stomach and began crawling through the narrow concrete pipe, ignoring the cold, muddy water, sharp rocks scraping her hands, her injured shoulder protesting. Behind her, she heard security forces coordinating their search, but she'd prepared for this. Kate pulled out the small packet Ghost had given her, military-grade scent masking powder. She dumped it on the ground behind her, covering her trail, buying precious minutes. After what felt like an eternity but was probably less than 2 minutes, Kate emerged on the other side. She was now outside the facility perimeter, in dense woodland. She oriented quickly and began moving east toward the rally point, an abandoned tractor shed about 1 kilometer away. Marcus was already there, crouched behind the shed. "They've got vehicles on the roads. Full lockdown." Graves is coordinating the search himself. "Then we need transportation before they establish a wider perimeter," Kate said, scanning the area. Through the trees, she could see a small farmhouse about 200 meters away, and in the yard, an old Land Rover. "Civilian involvement complicates things," Marcus observed. "Everything about this is already complicated," Kate replied. "Come on." They approached the farmhouse openly, having changed into civilian clothes from their go-bags. To any observer, they looked like hikers who'd gotten turned around. Exactly the impression they wanted to create. The elderly farmer who answered was initially suspicious, but softened when Kate explained they'd become separated from their hiking group. His wife invited them in for tea while they sorted things out. "No landline, I'm afraid," the farmer explained, "but I can drive you into the village. Only about 20 minutes. You can use the phone at the pub." "That would be wonderful," Kate said gratefully. "We don't want to be a bother." The drive to the village was tense, despite the farmer's cheerful conversation. Kate maintained her cover while Marcus scanned for military vehicles. So far, they'd managed to stay ahead of the expanding perimeter. In the village, they thanked the farmer and made their way to the small bus station. According to the schedule, the last bus to Braemar departed in 18 minutes. From Braemar, they could get a taxi to Ravenscroft Manor. Kate used the public phone to make a brief, cryptic call to William Reeves, identifying herself as Tom Blackwood's daughter and warning him of imminent danger. His response was immediate and professional. He would postpone his keynote address and increase security pending their arrival. The bus ride to Braemar took 40 minutes. Kate spent the time studying other passengers while Marcus kept watch for pursuit vehicles. Neither relaxed until they were in a taxi heading toward Ravenscroft Manor. They reached the manor at 11:30, 30 minutes before William Reeves was scheduled to speak. The sprawling Victorian estate had been converted into a conference center. Security was visible, but not overwhelming. A few uniformed personnel at the main gate. "This is where we split up," Kate told Marcus. "You find Emma and Klaus. They should be in position. I'm going in alone." "You sure about this?" Marcus asked, concern evident. "If Graves' shooter is here, they'll be expecting a team. Besides, you're more recognizable after all the competition coverage." Kate squeezed his arm. "I'll be fine. Just be ready when I give the signal." She approached the main gate with confidence, presenting the press credentials Emma had procured. The security guard checked her ID, compared it to his list, and waved her through. Sometimes the best disguise was simply acting like you belonged. Inside, the conference was already underway. Kate moved through crowded hallways with purpose, scanning faces, looking for William Reeves or anyone who might be part of Graves' operation. She found William Reeves in a small preparation room off the main conference hall. He was older than Ghost by a few years, with more gray in his hair, But the family resemblance was unmistakable. The same piercing eyes, the same bearing. "You must be Kate," he said, closing the door. "James told me you might be coming. Hell of a risk you took getting here." "We believe Graves has a shooter in position to kill you during your speech," Kate said without preamble. William nodded grimly. "I've taken precautions based on your warning. Increased security, moved the speech to a smaller room, delayed the timing. But if Graves is as good as James says, precautions might not be enough." "Then we turn the tables," Kate said. "You give your speech as planned, but with different content. Present the evidence my father gathered, and I'll find the shooter and stop them." "What content?" Kate pulled out a flash drive, the data she and Marcus had extracted from the secure server using her father's access code. "Everything. The librarian files, names, dates, financial records, client lists, everything needed to connect Graves and Coldfire to dozens of illegal assassinations." William took the drive, his expression a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. "Tom would be proud. You finished what he started." "Not yet," Kate said. "Not until you're safe and Graves is in custody." She left William to prepare and made her way to an unoccupied office with a clear view of the church tower Marcus had identified as the most likely sniper position, approximately 1,600 meters to the northeast, with perfect elevation, clear line of sight, and multiple escape routes. The hunting rifle William had procured wasn't ideal, but it was functional. Kate set up her position, established communication with Marcus through the encrypted radio Emma had provided, and settled in to wait. At 1400 hours exactly, William Reeves entered the conference room now filled with security experts, intelligence officials, and international journalists. Instead of his planned presentation, he stepped aside to reveal a large screen. On it appeared the librarian files, page after page of meticulously documented evidence connecting Coldfire operatives to assassinations carried out for private clients. Names, dates, shell companies, ballistic evidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," William's voice carried through Kate's earpiece as she scanned the church tower through her scope. "What you're seeing is evidence of a criminal conspiracy within our intelligence communities. Operation Coldfire, supposedly ended in 1991, never stopped. It evolved into an assassination for hire network that has betrayed everything we claim to stand for." Through her scope, Kate saw it. Movement behind the louvered window near the top of the church tower. The faint glint of scope glass. The subtle shift of someone settling into firing position. "Shooter confirmed," she radioed Marcus. "Church tower, top floor, east-facing window." "Copy that," Marcus responded, moving to intercept. William continued his presentation, revealing more details about Graves' role, about the clients who'd paid for Coldfire services, about the systematic corruption of a program that had once served legitimate national security interests. Through her scope, Kate watched the shooter making final adjustments. In seconds, they would fire. She could see it in their body language. "Now," she radioed. In the church tower, chaos erupted. Marcus, Emma, and Klaus breached the position simultaneously. Through her scope, Kate saw the struggle. Marcus tackling the shooter, Emma securing the weapon while Klaus restrained the would-be assassin. But Kate's instincts screamed a warning. This was too easy. Graves was too professional to rely on a single shooter. She scanned frantically. And then she saw it. Movement on the rooftop of a building adjacent to the manor. A second shooter, already in position, already aiming at William Reeves. The backup plan. The contingency that separated professionals from amateurs. There was no time to warn anyone. Kate had one chance, maybe 2 seconds. She settled her breathing, found her natural point of aim, and let everything else fall away. The Blackwood breath carried her to that place of perfect clarity. Her shot cracked across the Scottish countryside. Through the scope, she watched the backup shooter jerk backward, his rifle spinning away. Her bullet had struck his weapon, disarming him, the kind of precision shot that required equal parts skill and luck. Security personnel swarmed both positions. The primary shooter was subdued in the church tower. The backup assassin was captured on the rooftop, and Marcus's voice came through the radio. Primary shooter secured. It's one of those Russian contractors Klaus identified. Petrov just arrived. He's helping us restrain him. Looks like the old Spetsnaz colonel wasn't in on Graves' operation after all. Kate felt a twist of surprise. Ghost had suspected everyone, but perhaps some Cold War warriors still had honor. In a surveillance van parked 3 blocks from the manor, Major Owen Graves was arrested while attempting to flee. Communications equipment linking him directly to both shooters found in his possession. It was over. Kate lowered her rifle, feeling a profound sense of completion wash over her. Her father's killer would face justice. The organization that had corrupted his work would be dismantled, and she had played a crucial role in making it happen. 6 months later, Master Sergeant Catherine Blackwood stood before a new class of advanced sniper candidates at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Her uniform bore the insignia of her new rank, earned through exceptional valor and contribution to national security. Her shoulder moved freely now, fully recovered, though she no longer sought combat deployment. She was where she belonged, teaching. Sniping isn't about the weapon, she told the attentive faces before her, a mix of men and women, young soldiers hungry to learn from someone who'd proven herself at the highest levels. It's about the warrior behind the weapon, your focus, your discipline, your heart, and most importantly, knowing why you pull the trigger. She thought of her father as she spoke, of the lessons he taught her about responsibility and conscience, about the weight that came with the power to take a life from distances where the target never knew they were being watched. My father taught me that. Master Chief Tom Blackwood, SEAL Team 6. He taught me that shooting isn't just about hitting targets. It's about understanding the weight of every shot, every decision. This program will teach you technical skills, but more importantly, it will teach you to be warriors with conscience, to honor the code, to know that with great skill comes great responsibility. After the session, Marcus approached, now Staff Sergeant Marcus Hayes, her second in command and closest friend. How'd it go? Good group, Kate replied. Motivated, though none of them can shoot worth a damn yet. Marcus laughed. Give them time. Not everyone's a Blackwood. They walked together toward the range, where students were already gathering. Fort Bragg's shooting facility now included a special section dedicated to extreme, long-range work, with targets set at 2,847 meters and 3,285 meters, distances that commemorated Kate's most famous shots. A small brass plaque marked the entrance. In honor of MCPO Tom Blackwood and MS Sergeant Catherine Blackwood, the Blackwood Legacy. Heard from the Reeves brothers? Marcus asked. Both of them. Ghost is consulting for the Senate Committee on Intelligence Oversight. William testified last week. Operation Coldfire is completely dismantled. 47 arrests internationally, including Graves and most of his network. Kate paused. Emma Larson was promoted to major in Swedish intelligence. She's heading their new counter-assassination task force. Klaus Weber retired from active duty, teaching position in Munich. We still exchange emails. And Graves himself? Life sentence, federal supermax, no possibility of parole. Kate's expression hardened momentarily. During interrogation, he confirmed ordering my father's death, made it look like cardiac arrest using an untraceable compound. The confession was part of his plea deal to avoid execution. Marcus nodded grimly. At least you got the truth. Yes, at least there's that. They reached the range where students waited, eager and nervous in equal measure. Kate paused, her hand going to the pendant around her neck. A polished .308 shell casing that had been the first round her father ever let her fire when she was 12 years old. She'd worn it through 2 combat tours, through her injury and recovery, through Scotland and the confrontation with Graves. It was her reminder of where she came from and what she stood for. You okay? Marcus asked, noticing her moment of reflection. Just remembering something Dad used to say, Kate smiled slightly. He told me that shell casings tell a story. They mark where we've been and what we've done. And he said to make sure my story was one I could be proud of. She looked out at the students, the next generation of military snipers, young men and women who would carry forward the traditions and responsibilities of their craft. The path that had brought her here, from her father's lessons in the West Virginia mountains to the dusty combat zones of Afghanistan, through the humiliation of custodial duty and the vindication of impossible shots, had forged her into something she'd never expected to become. Not just a warrior, not just a teacher, but a keeper of standards that went beyond mere marksmanship. A guardian of the conscience that separated righteous warriors from mere killers. "Ready?" Marcus asked. Kate nodded, stepping forward to address her students. "Let's begin." The afternoon sun caught the brass casings scattered across the range from the morning's training, each one gleaming like a small promise. Kate Blackwood had once collected those casings as penance for an injury that wasn't her fault. Now she collected them as evidence of progress, of skills developing, of students learning to carry the weight that came with the power to reach out across impossible distances and change the world with a single shot. The Blackwood family didn't miss when it mattered, and teaching the next generation to shoot with both skill and conscience, that mattered more than anything. The story that had begun with humiliation and pain had transformed into something else entirely. Not redemption, exactly, because Kate had never needed redemption, but resolution, completion, the fulfillment of a legacy that stretched back through her father to her grandfather and beyond. A legacy built not just on precision and skill, but on the unwavering belief that power must be tempered by conscience, that capability must be guided by morality. As the students began their exercises, Kate watched with the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd found her place in the world. Not on the battlefield, though she'd proven herself there. Not collecting brass casings, though she'd learned humility in that work. But here, passing on what she'd learned, ensuring that the next generation of warriors understood not just how to kill, but when, and why, and at what cost. The Scottish wind had been cold when she'd made that impossible shot at 3,500 meters. But the Colorado sun was warm now. In the future, built on the foundation her father had laid and she had honored, looked brighter than she'd ever dared to hope. The impossible shot had been just the beginning. Everything that mattered came after.